Tracing the career of John Carpenter does not merely track the legacy of an iconoclastic filmmaker. It tells the story of Hollywood and cinema history. Through the 50s and 60s, Hollywood went through a tumultuous decline with the advent of television and the changing demographic of cinema-going audiences. More folks were staying home, watching television, and those going out were now more educated and more urbane, some enchanted by the works of Fellini, Kurosawa, and the titans of foreign cinema. Also, during this period, academia was coming around to finally legitimizing the art form of cinema, creating programs and degrees, and for these programs to be successful, students were needed. The studios, seeing the young wave of theatergoers and diminishing returns, struck upon an idea: low-cost films from younger filmmakers. Their control would be limited, but the cost would be low. The new Hollywood film movement was born. Enter John Carpenter, film student. He joined the USC Film School in these early days. However, he did not graduate, dropping out to complete his first film, Dark Star, and a career was born. But first, what exactly represents a new Hollywood film?
Film scholar Todd Berliner has written extensively about new Hollywood aesthetics and breaks down some of its vital elements. New Hollywood films show a perverse tendency to integrate in narrative incidental ways story information counterproductive to the film's overt narrative purposes. New Hollywood filmmakers situate their filmmaking practices in between those of classical Hollywood and those of European and Asian art cinema. These films prompt spectator responses more uncertain than those of more typical Hollywood cinema. The narratives place an uncommon emphasis on irresolution, particularly at the moment of climax or an epilogue, when more conventional Hollywood movies busy themselves tying up loose ends.
It was.
More than this, new Hollywood cinema was a changing of the guard. Up until that point, film had been producer-led and producer-centric. Studios had all the power, and they retained it, both in production as well as distribution. The watershed Paramount case of 1948 broke the monopoly. Block booking, which is theaters selling multiple films to a theater as a unit, and the ownership of theater chains by studios were deemed in violation of anti-competition and monopoly practices. Studios released control to the young filmmakers, who often not only directed, but took part in the writing, producing, and post-production on a picture. Also fortunate, this period arrived at the same time that the new rating system of 1968 was born from the breakdown of the production code, allowing for more mature and disturbing content. Carpenter hit the ground running, following Dark Star with Assault on Precinct 13. Then came his major breakthrough, Halloween, then The Fog,
Between midnight and 1, it will find you.
Escape from New York, and on and on.
It's not the future we wanted, but the future
Hollywood,
that happened.
never quite comfortable with this new youthful cinema, quickly saw in new Hollywood's output its own undoing, when works of fellow film students Steven Spielberg and George Lucas helped usher in the age of the blockbuster.
There is a creature alive today who has survived millions of years of evolution.
The tentpole movie was soon born, and the movies were a business again, not merely works of art, but minor economies unto themselves, with theatrical spectacles only the beginning, and the lunchboxes, t-shirts, toys, and sequels quick to follow. While Carpenter was filming Escape from New York and what would become his first box office failure, The Thing, producers were more keen to return to the great financial success of Carpenter's Halloween, and in 1981, Halloween 2 arrived. This would not be directed by Carpenter, though Carpenter did co-write the script. He could not find a reason for the continuation of the story until one night, a eureka moment. As the 80s continued, blockbuster cinema and serialization took firm roots, and Carpenter found work harder and harder to come by. He took on Christine in 1983, primarily because he needed a job, and this was the only one on offer. He would make 4 more films in the 80s, though it was more likely his creation Michael Myers that a viewer would associate him with during this period. However, Carpenter kept working. Memoirs of the Invisible Man, In the Mouth of Madness, and Village of the Damned, but each with diminishing critical and financial success. Even his own sequel, 1996's Escape from LA, returned less than half of its original budget at the box office. From here, he made 3 more films and announced his retirement in 2010 with The Ward. It is perhaps the other Carpenter properties of the early aughts that are more important to discuss here. In 2005, both Assault on Precinct 13 and The Fog were remade. Halloween was remade in 2007, followed by a sequel, and again in 2018. But why are these films bankrolled while Carpenter himself continued to find trouble and hurdles in making his own films?
When the movie Jaws first opened, it created a sensation. The all-new Jaws 2.
The Hollywood studios, fully recovered from the dark director-oriented days of New Hollywood, latched onto the tentpole and never let go.
This time, it's personal.
Star Wars and Jaws led to The Empire Strikes Back and Jaws 2, then towards Indiana Jones, The Matrix, Lord of the Rings, and then on to Star Wars again and again. With the arrival of Iron Man and Marvel Studios in 2008, the game was pretty much up. Sure, the cost of one of these flicks was the cost of 3 other regular films, but the returns were that much greater and the risk lower because the audience was built in. When one wasn't making a blockbuster or sequel, the remake market came with its own branding and original audience. Nobody wanted egg on their face for the failure that might emerge from a project they shepherded.
You started a panic on a public beach.
Remakes are nothing new, however. Carpenter was no stranger to remakes. A fan of Howard Hawks' Rio Bravo, he repurposed the narrative in Assault on Precinct 13 and again in 2001's Ghosts of Mars. Likewise, he remade The Thing, though returning to the source material, and then remade Village of the Damned. So, what's the difference in these clearly Carpenter-stamped remakes and the forgettable remakes of his own work? Again, we can point to the studio system. For these projects were financial projects, ushered in by a producer rather than a director, and to an extent, made by a committee and not with the voice of one auteur. 2007's Halloween, for better or worse, can make an argument against this, clearly being a Rob Zombie picture. Table reads, studio notes, and anything idiosyncratic removed in an attempt to please everyone and get to the bottom dollar, while any potential soul or individual reason for being was sucked out of the project. Whereas, who wrote Assault on Precinct 13? Carpenter. Who did the music? Carpenter. Who edited the picture? John T. Chance? Wait, wasn't that the name of John Wayne's character in Rio Bravo? Yes. And it is also the name John Carpenter gave himself for editing the project. Carpenter's remakes, even if flops, were his, the voice and vision of one mind. This is what the studio failed to grasp. Art comes from the artist, and too many cooks in the kitchen dilutes the stew. A film needs a point of view, not mass approval. So, Carpenter is retired from cinema, off on a music career, and will Carpenter get off his butt and make another film? Maybe, maybe not. On-demand content is higher than ever, and there are even isolated examples of filmmakers usurping the studio route altogether. But every year new talent emerges, not only from USC and NYU, but also from basements and apartments everywhere. They emerge onto streets and they don't see a zombie apocalypse, but an apocalypse more akin to They Live. Streets filled with fake consumerism and endless remakes. Armed not with shotguns, but new affordable film technology, it is up to these brave soldiers to dig deep and usher in the next wave of cinema. Or Carpenter can go and make something.
Hey Tongalers, thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe for more exclusive Tongal content. Be sure to visit the Tongal website at tongal.com for some exciting opportunities.